They say the quietest houses often hide the loudest hearts. Mine had been quiet for far too long. The kind of quiet that presses against your chest until it feels heavy. At night, that silence became unbearable. Every creak of the wooden floor, every sigh of the old walls reminded me of the emptiness I had chosen to live with. I told myself I liked peace, that I preferred solitude. But truth has a way of scratching at your skin until you cannot ignore it anymore. I was lonely, and the silence made sure I never forgot it. The silence broke one evening with something as ordinary as a broken pipe. I had been standing in my kitchen when the sink erupted, water spilling across the counters, spraying onto the tiled floor, soaking everything in its path. I scrambled for towels, slipping on the wet floor, trying to contain the flood that refused to be contained. By the time I managed to shut the valve, my kitchen looked like a battlefield. I leaned against the counter, drenched and frustrated, realizing this was not something I could fix on my own. So, I made a call. He arrived just after dusk. The knock on the door was firm, steady, almost commanding. When I opened it, I was met with a stranger who seemed to carry the weight of quiet confidence. His name was Marcus. He stood there with a toolbox in one hand, the faint sheen of rain glistening on his shoulders, his shirt clinging slightly to his frame. His presence filled the doorway in a way that made me pause. My words caught for a moment in my throat. "Evening, ma'am," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "You called about a leak." I stepped aside quickly, embarrassed by the mess that awaited him. "Yes, it started earlier today. I tried to manage it, but it only got worse." He offered me a small smile that felt disarming. "That's what I'm here for. Let's take a look." Marcus crouched beneath the sink, sleeves rolled up, veins and muscles shifting subtly as he worked. I leaned against the doorway, my arms folded, trying not to stare too long. But there was something about him. It wasn't just his appearance. It was the way he moved, with patience and assurance, as though fixing a broken pipe was as natural to him as breathing. Tools clinked softly against the floor, the hum of his focus filling the room. Every now and then he asked a question, his voice vibrating low through the small space, and I found myself answering quickly, almost too quickly, afraid he would notice the nervous tremor in my voice. After a while he pulled out a rusted valve, shaking his head. "Not too bad," he said, looking up at me. "You caught it early. Another few days and this whole kitchen would have been a mess you could not control." I let out a soft laugh, the sound foreign to my own ears. That is the story of my life. Always catching things right before they fall apart. Our eyes met then, and though he did not speak, there was something in his gaze that lingered, something that saw beyond the surface. It made my chest tighten in a way I had not felt in years. He quickly returned to his work, but the air between us had shifted. When he finished, he did not rush to leave. Instead, he cleaned up carefully, wiping the counters, stacking the soaked towels neatly by the door. Most workers would have left the mess behind, but Marcus moved with quiet attention, as though every detail mattered. "That should hold for now," he said, rising to his feet. He wiped his hands on a rag, his voice calm. "But I will need to come back tomorrow with a part one do not have with me." I should have nodded, thanked him, and closed the door. But instead, the words slipped from me before I could stop them. "You must be tired. Let me make you something before you go." He hesitated, then gave me that smile again. "Coffee would be nice." I moved to the counter, busying myself with mugs, pretending not to notice how my hands trembled. The air felt different, thicker somehow, like the walls themselves were aware of the silence between us. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table while the rain tapped softly against the windows. At first the conversation was light. He told me about the strangest repair calls he had answered over the years, and I laughed at the ridiculousness of some of his stories. But then, slowly, our words dug deeper. He spoke of nights that felt too long, of quiet that weighed too heavy. I found myself admitting the same, surprising myself with how much I revealed to a man I had only just met. Something shifted between us that evening. It was not loud or obvious, but it was real. A connection, fragile yet undeniable, like a thread weaving itself quietly between two souls who had spent too long adrift. When Marcus finally stood to leave, I almost told him to stay, though I could not have explained why. Instead, I walked him to the door, the sound of rain filling the silence between us. "Thank you," I whispered. He looked at me for a long moment, as though trying to read something on my face. Then he nodded. "I will see you tomorrow." When the door closed, the house felt different. Warmer, as if his presence still lingered in the air. That night as I lay in bed, I could still hear his voice. I could still see the way his eyes had searched mine. I had not expected him. I had not expected the way something as simple as a broken pipe could shift the course of my days. But deep down I knew. That broken pipe was only the beginning. The next day seemed to stretch endlessly. I found myself glancing at the clock again and again, restless in a way I could not explain. It felt ridiculous, I kept telling myself. He was just a worker, a man who came to fix a broken pipe. Yet the memory of his voice stayed with me. The calm weight of his gaze echoed in my thoughts, and the house felt colder without it. By late afternoon, a knock on the door startled me from my wandering thoughts. My heart skipped before my feet even carried me to the entrance. When I opened the door, there he was again. Marcus. He stood with his toolbox in one hand and that same steady presence that seemed to fill every corner around him. "I brought the part," he said, lifting the box slightly. His voice was smooth and unhurried, but there was something beneath it. I stepped aside, letting him in. Just like the day before, he went straight to the kitchen. I followed, leaning on the counter as he settled on the floor, sliding beneath the sink. His broad shoulders pressed against the cabinet, his arms stretching as he reached for a tool. The soft scrape of metal, the faint drip of water, and the occasional sound of his breath filled the silence. After a while, I could not hold it anymore. "Do you always work alone?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. There was a pause before his answer. "Most of the time. People want quick repairs, not conversations. But you..." His words lingered for a moment. Then he added, "You asked me to stay yesterday." My chest tightened at his directness. "Coffee," I said quickly, forcing a smile. I offered coffee. He chuckled under the sink. The sound was deep and warm, sending an unexpected shiver through me. Still, it was nice. When he finally stood, his shirt clung faintly to his frame as he leaned forward to test the faucet. Water flowed smooth and steady. He wiped his hands, nodding with satisfaction. "There. It should be fine now." I should have thanked him and ended it there, but the words slipped out before I could stop them. "Stay a little longer. I made something earlier. You could eat before you go." He hesitated only for a moment. Then his lips curved in that quiet smile of his. "All right." We sat across from each other at the table. The silence between us was heavier this time, rich with things unsaid. I poked at my food, my fork tapping lightly against the plate, too aware of how close he sat. His arm brushed the edge of the table, and my breath quickened when our eyes met across the space between us. At one point, I nearly knocked over my glass. His hand shot forward, steadying it. His fingers brushed mine. It was nothing more than a passing touch, but it sent a spark racing through me. My breath caught, and for a moment neither of us moved. The air pressed in on us, pulling us closer in a way neither of us dared to act upon. I leaned back, trying to escape the intensity of the moment. "So Marcus," I asked lightly, "do you always make people this nervous when you fix their kitchens?" His eyes darkened slightly with amusement. His smile was slow and deliberate. "Only the ones who keep looking at me like you do." Heat rushed to my cheeks. I dropped my gaze, my heart pounding, but I could not fight the small smile tugging at my lips. Rain began to patter against the window again. The steady rhythm filled the quiet as we finished the meal. The silence no longer felt empty. It pulsed with anticipation, with a longing neither of us was willing to name. When he finally rose to leave, I walked him to the door. The rain outside had thickened into a steady fall. He paused at the doorway, his hand still on the frame, his eyes lingering on me in a way that made the air grow heavier. "Do you need anything else fixed?" he asked softly. The words carried a weight that was not about broken pipes. I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came. I only held his gaze, trapped in the pull of it, wishing and fearing that he would step closer. But after a moment, he only nodded, as if restraining himself from something neither of us dared admit, and turned into the rain. I closed the door slowly, my fingers pressed against the cool wood. My heart was beating far too fast. Something inside me was changing, something I could not control. He was just a worker, a man who came when I called. Yet already, the thought of him was shaping my nights. That evening, as thunder rolled across the dark sky, I lay awake again. Every glance, every word, every accidental touch replayed in my mind. My body hummed with an ache I could not name, my thoughts whispering questions I was afraid to answer. The storm outside raged on, but I knew it was nothing compared to the storm building inside my own walls. The storm that night was relentless. Heavy sheets of rain pounded the roof, while wind pressed against the windows, rattling them as if demanding entry. I stood by the glass, watching the water blur the world outside into streaks of silver and black. The house felt smaller somehow, swallowed by the noise of the storm and the weight of my own restless thoughts. I tried to lose myself in a book, but the words refused to settle in my mind. Every page reminded me of him. The sound of his laugh, the warmth of his hand brushing mine, the way his eyes lingered too long, as though they saw something deeper than I wanted to reveal. And then, just as the thunder cracked close enough to make the lights flicker, there was a knock at the door. My breath caught. I hurried across the room, my heart racing. When I opened it, Marcus stood there, soaked through, rain dripping from his hair and shoulders. "I am sorry," he said, his voice steady but low. "My truck will not start in this weather." I did not know where else to go. For a moment, I could only stare. The storm roared behind him, his figure framed by the lightning flashing across the sky. I stepped aside quickly. "Come in. You cannot be out in this." He entered, his boots leaving a trail of water on the floor, his shirt clinging to his body in a way that made it hard to look away. I grabbed a towel from the hallway closet and handed it to him. Our fingers brushed again. A spark. Always a spark. "You can stay until it clears," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "The couch is comfortable enough." He smiled faintly, wiping his hair with the towel. "Thank you. I did not want to trouble you again." "You are not trouble," I whispered, though I was not sure he heard me over the thunder. The power flickered, then went out completely, leaving the house wrapped in sudden silence except for the storm outside. I lit a few candles, their golden glow casting long shadows along the walls. The air shifted, warmer, closer, more intimate. Marcus sat on the couch, his hair still damp, his presence filling the room as though the storm itself had carried him back to me. I joined him, clutching a blanket around my shoulders. The flickering light painted his face in soft tones, his eyes catching the glow every time he looked at me. We talked to fill the silence. At first about nothing, music, the storm, small pieces of our lives, but as the night deepened, so did our words. He told me about the loneliness of his work, how people often treated him like he was invisible, someone who only existed to fix what was broken. His voice softened as he admitted he wanted more, not just in work, but in life. I listened, drawn in, my chest aching at the honesty in his tone. "You are not invisible," I said firmly, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "You make this house feel different when you are here. Like it is alive again." His gaze locked onto mine then, steady and searching. The storm outside could have swallowed the world whole, but all I felt was the space between us shrinking. At one point, I shivered beneath the blanket. Without a word, he shifted closer and draped half of it over himself, his arm brushing against mine as he settled beside me. The warmth of his body seeped into me, steady and grounding, yet it set every nerve in me alight. We sat like that for a long time, the silence charged and full of things unspoken. My heartbeat was loud in my ears, my breath shallow, and still I did not move away. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the room in a sudden burst of light. I turned my head and found him already watching me. His eyes lingered, softer now, almost questioning. My lips parted, 1,000 words caught in my throat, but none of them could escape. He leaned slightly closer, not enough to close the distance, but enough to make me feel the pull of it, the gravity drawing us together. I could smell the faint trace of rain still clinging to his skin, mixed with the warmth of candlelight and something else, something purely him. And then he whispered, barely audible over the rain, "You are not alone anymore." Those words sank into me like a promise. My chest tightened, my body trembling, and for the first time in years, I believed it. I did not kiss him that night, though every part of me wanted to. Instead, we stayed there, sitting close, our hands resting near each other on the couch cushion, so near that the heat of his skin brushed against mine. It was restraint and it was torment, but it was also something beautiful. When the storm finally eased and the world outside grew quiet, he fell asleep sitting upright, his head tilted slightly, his breath deep and even. I sat beside him, watching his face in the candlelight, my heart aching with something I was not ready to name. And in that moment, I realized the truth. The storm had not driven him here. Not really. It had only revealed what was already pulling us together. The morning after the storm, the house was still. A soft mist hung outside the windows, the world damp and glistening from the rain. I moved quietly through the kitchen, trying not to wake Marcus, who had finally stretched out on the couch during the night. But when I turned with a mug of coffee in my hand, I found him already awake, sitting upright, his eyes fixed on me as though he had been waiting. "Good morning," I said softly, my voice betraying the nervous flutter in my chest. "Morning," he replied, his tone warm and steady. He stood, walking toward me. The faint scruff of his beard caught the early light, and something about the way he looked at me made my heart stumble. He accepted the mug I handed him, but his fingers brushed mine deliberately this time, lingering just long enough to make me catch my breath. We sat at the table together, sipping in silence. Every sound in the room felt sharper, every glance heavier. At one point he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his eyes locked on mine. "You never told me why you live alone in such a big house," he said gently. I hesitated, then sighed. Because it is easier to live alone than to be left behind. People leave. They always do. And I got tired of making space for them when they would not stay. His jaw tightened slightly, as if my words struck deeper than I intended. Then he leaned back, his gaze unwavering. I am not like them. Something inside me quivered. His certainty terrified me, yet I wanted to believe it more than I had ever wanted to believe anything. The day passed quietly, but beneath the surface, everything was shifting. By evening, the weight of it all pressed too heavily to ignore. I was in the kitchen again, washing the last of the dishes, when I felt him behind me. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that the air thickened, charged with the tension that had been building for days. I turned slowly, and there he was. His gaze held mine, unwavering, steady, and burning with something he had not dared show fully until now. He stepped closer, his hand lifting as if to touch my face, then pausing in hesitation. I could feel my breath catch, my heart hammering in my chest. Every part of me wanted him to close the space between us, to erase the careful restraint that had defined us until now. Marcus, I whispered, his name trembling on my lips. That was all it took. His hand cupped my cheek, warm and grounding, and then his lips were on mine. The kiss was slow at first, almost cautious, but when I leaned into him, it deepened, growing with years of unspoken longing neither of us had admitted until this moment. His hands held me as though I was something fragile yet sacred, and mine clung to him like I had been waiting all my life to feel this kind of closeness. The world outside vanished. There was no storm, no silence, no empty years behind me. There was only him, and the way he kissed me like he was claiming every hidden piece of my heart. When we finally broke apart, his forehead rested against mine. Both of us breathless, trembling, undone. I should not be here, he whispered, though his grip on me did not loosen. Then why are you? I asked, my voice raw. Because I cannot stay away from you, he admitted, his words heavy with truth. That night, restraint shattered. He stayed, not on the couch, not in the guest room, but with me. It was not hurried. It was not reckless. It was slow, tender, deliberate. Every touch was careful, every kiss unspoken poetry. We moved together like two people who had been waiting their whole lives for this kind of intimacy. Afterward, we lay tangled beneath the sheets, the sound of our breaths the only music in the quiet house. His arm wrapped around me, his thumb drawing idle circles against my skin, as though even in rest he could not let me go. For the first time in years, I felt seen, held, wanted in a way that was not fleeting. But as the morning light crept through the curtains, reality came rushing back. I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. Still half asleep, I reached for it. A new message glowed across the screen. It was from a name I had not seen in months. My ex. The man who had walked out of my life so easily, leaving me with silence and unanswered questions. His words were simple, but they cut through me all the same. I made a mistake. Can we talk? My heart lurched, my stomach twisting. I set the phone down quickly, hoping Marcus had not noticed. But when I turned, his eyes were already on me, steady, searching, and far too perceptive. Who was that? He asked quietly. I hesitated, my throat dry. It was no one. Just someone from before. His gaze did not waver, but something in it shifted. A shadow, faint but undeniable. He did not press, yet the silence between us carried questions I could not answer. I reached for his hand, but in that moment I wondered if the past I had tried to bury was about to unravel the fragile, beautiful thing that had just begun. Love had finally walked into my home. but so had the possibility of losing it before it even had the chance to grow. And now, I want to leave you with a question. If you were in my place, would you give Marcus your full heart and risk everything? Or would you turn back to the man who once left you behind but now claims he has changed? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because your perspective means more than you realize. And if this story touched you in any way, do not forget to like this video, share it with someone who loves suspense and romance, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next chapter of my journey.